Hello there. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm Ryan in Singapore. Welcome to our mindfulness practice. Today's topic is listening to resistance. So, last time we talked about beginning again. It sounds simple, but it becomes more difficult when we encounter the fact that we realize that we don't want to begin again. So, what do we do in that situation? We considered what it was like when something important to us starts to fall out of our routine, and then we ask ourselves, does this still matter? Is this something I want to return to? And there's some nice simplicity to noticing if it matters, can I begin again? But then we kind of may fall into something else, is that I don't want to. What happens when I know that there's something that I should do, but then there's this I don't want to kind of feeling about it? I know meditation's good for me, but I don't want to sit down and meditate. I know movement is good for my body, but I don't want to exercise. I feel better when I take care of myself, but I don't want to do all of this self-care. Sometimes even the things we chose for ourselves start feeling like obligations. So the real question I want to ask today, and I want us to ask, is what if instead of immediately fighting resistance or giving into it, we listen to it? So then this really is the key question for today. So I'm going to say it one more time. What if instead of immediately fighting resistance or giving into it, we listen to it? And so this really is kind of, there's really a key tie-in with mindfulness in that when we're listening to ourselves, we're listening to the situation that's happening, we're doing it with a kind of neutral curiosity instead of immediately jumping to judging or making decisions. So let's look at what our minds do as resistance comes. So first, understand resistance isn't necessarily the enemy. And often we treat resistance as something to overcome. We tell ourselves, just do it. Be disciplined. Stop making excuses. Push through. And sometimes that's exactly what we need. But mindfulness offers this other possibility, this possibility for us to be curious about our experience. Resistance is another human experience. And we can lean into understanding and becoming curious about it instead of immediately resisting or trying to push through it. So, what does the I want to feeling actually feel like? Are there thoughts that come with it? Is there a tightness that you feel? Is there a heaviness? Is there irritation? Is there fear? Is there fatigue? Is there restlessness? Is there an urge to do almost anything else? And we've talked about procrastination before, so, what does that feel like and what is around it? So can you get curious about the experience of resistance itself? So before we decide to do anything about the resistance, we can observe it. We can take a look at it. We can roll out the red carpet, welcome this resistance, treat it as a friend, because it is part of our human experience. We don't need to immediately push it away or obey it. So mindfulness doesn't require us to obey resistance, but it doesn't require us to fight it either. The first step is we listen. Next, not all resistance is saying the same thing. So I don't want to sounds like one experience that we kind of package together, right? Everything that falls under the I don't want to umbrella might feel like it's the same thing. But underneath, we have some very different things. So one of the things could be avoidance. Sometimes I simply don't feel like doing something difficult. And that could be something as simple as getting out of bed. It could be sitting down for meditation, starting the workout, having that difficult conversation, or beginning whatever work it is that you need to do. Often the hardest part is simply starting, and once we get going, then it starts to be a little bit easier. And if we always wait until we feel like it, some important things that we need to do just never get done. So here, resistance may need a little discipline or encouragement. Another possibility is staleness. Sometimes resistance happens because something that once nourished us has become mechanical. The same meditation every day, the same exercise routine, another thing on the schedule. Something we once chose has turned into something that we have to do, that it's become an obligation and there's no more fun or joy in it. And in fact, this is maybe one of the main reasons that I chose this topic, because that's, before I left for the summer holidays, I was really ready for a break from all of my routines, So, what is this like? The practice that we're doing may still matter, but perhaps our relationship with it needs some refreshing because things have just gotten stale. Maybe the answer isn't stopping. Maybe the answer is changing how we're doing it. And so this is all investigation that we can do alongside. Another possibility is protection. So sometimes resistance is trying to tell us something important. And I guess I'll use this personal example. I think I'd mentioned that I'd stopped doing yoga for a while. I haven't done it for a few months, and the reasons that there was, I do put my mind and intensity into what I do, and I was, concentrating quite hard, and as I'm reaching my arms up, I felt some kind of muscle pull here. And now, even thinking about yoga, not only is it a difficult thing to get the motivation to do, but now there's something extra here that's trying to tell me, well, maybe I shouldn't be doing it. Especially like kind of the push-up can really start to feel that pain here. So is that just laziness? Or maybe there's fear there because I was hurt from doing this before. My body is asking me to pay attention. Maybe I need to talk to my teacher, to modify my practice, I finally, after months, talked to a doctor yesterday and got a referral for a physiotherapist, right? It's like, I honestly, I didn't even want to do that. I just was like, in my mind, hoping like this is just going to magically get better, right? If I just sit and do nothing, and and there was something attractive as well about not doing yoga for a few months, and that was an interesting thing to explore as well. It's like, well, what's behind this? So maybe it really is good for me to take a break so that, two things, protection and staleness, kind of get solved at the same time. So blindly pushing through resistance isn't wise. So the question to ask ourselves is this resistance asking me to stop? Is it asking me to change? Or is it simply asking me to get started? So as we start to look more closely at our resistance, we can discover really what's down deep inside of it. And so I don't want to sounds like one thing, but there are at least 3 different things that it can mean. And we don't always know the answer immediately, and that's okay, right? That's the first step, is to explore our feelings and to explore what's really behind this. So one of the problems that this causes is that we immediately believe our expectations. Without mindfulness, we hear our explanations and we just think of them as fact. So there's one more layer here. Our mind is really good at explaining automatically why we don't want to do something. I'm too tired. I'll do it tomorrow. This really isn't helping anyway. I don't have enough time. I need a break. Do those explanations sound familiar? Sometimes those explanations are true, and I think it's important to recognize that it's not always related to some kind of avoidance. Sometimes there's stories constructed around an uncomfortable feeling. And mindfulness doesn't mean that we need to be suspicious of every single thing that we think. Again, it's about that non-judgmental awareness, right? Non-judgment, like suspicion, has some element of judgment in it, right? So it means recognizing a thought about my resistance isn't necessarily the same thing as understanding the resistance. And so our bodies have a lot of information inside. We can look at what's going on inside. So let's feel first. Notice clearly what's happening in the body. Notice the thoughts clearly. Notice the emotional tone around all of this. Notice the urge to move away or to move toward. Maybe we're moving towards something else. And then ask ourselves, what's actually needed here? Another thing to be aware of is that self-care can become another source of stress. And that's another thing that's been really alive for me recently. There can be so many things that we want to do to take care of ourselves. I've talked about the 5 pillars of mental health before, right? And just listing them sometimes feels exhausting. Meditate, exercise, eat well, sleep enough, hydrate enough. It could be more as well. Maintain my relationships, be productive, take time for myself. All of that can actually add additional stress instead of making us feel less stressed. So at some point, taking care of myself starts to feel like a full-time job. And then even self-care becomes yet another standard that we're failing to meet, which creates this kind of interesting paradox, right? Something that's originally intended to support us turns into another source of pressure. So perhaps resistance isn't like, I don't care about myself, right? I mean, sometimes that's what is, that's what's coming out of this, right? I don't want to do my self-care routines. Why not? It's not because I don't want to take care of myself or I don't care about myself. Instead, it's saying, I am tired of constantly managing myself. And that deserves a little bit of compassion. So the question isn't necessarily about how to make ourselves do everything. Instead, it could be, what's actually going to support me right now? Ultimately, mindfulness won't make the decision for us. It just helps to create a little bit more space. We've got the feeling of resistance and then our immediate reaction or action to whatever it is that we're feeling. And in that space between feeling resistance and reacting, there's a choice. Sometimes I really don't want to do this and I'm going to do it anyway. Sometimes I don't want to do this because something needs to change. And then sometimes, actually, I don't need to do this anymore. All three of these responses can potentially be the wisest response. The important thing is that we're not automatically doing anything. We're not automatically obeying the resistance, pushing through, pushing harder. Just do it because that's the thing that needs to get done. It's not automatically fighting the resistance. And it's not automatically judging ourselves for resisting what's going on. We're learning to hear it clearly enough to respond wisely. So in today's meditation, we're not going to try to get rid of resistance. And we're not going to deliberately create resistance either. We're going to settle into the body and the breath. And as we practice, we'll notice the small moments that appear, the small moments of resistance that start showing up naturally. So maybe this appears in wanting to move. We talked about that a little bit last time. What happens when we want to move? And that is part of the exploration today. If you find yourself, we're going to sit for 20 minutes, and I'm going to encourage you to keep the same posture for the 20 minutes. And again, wanting to move doesn't necessarily mean you have to push through it and continue to stay still. It's observing your resistance to staying still and then making a wise decision about what to do. Maybe it's wanting the meditation to end that you see showing up. Maybe it's not liking a particular sensation that you're having. Maybe you're feeling bored. Maybe you're restless. Maybe you're irritated. Maybe you want to follow that super interesting thought, like jump on the thought train and go for a ride. When resistance appears, see if you can pause first before you do anything about it. And perhaps silently asking yourself, what is this like? Where do I feel? What thoughts are showing up along with it? What does this seem to be asking me to do? So rather than automatically obeying or fighting, let's see if we can simply listen. Let's go ahead and get into our meditation. Get comfortable. Find a meditation posture that's going to be suitable for you, conducive to your practice. And I would encourage you today to find a posture that you think you can maintain for the duration of this meditation. So again, it's around 20 minutes. So what I'm going to do to get started is just kind of move my head around, roll my shoulders a bit, just kind of notice where there's some tightness, and see if just through a little bit of movement before I get started into stillness, can the movement just kind of help to relax everything. And so I'd encourage you to sit up straight, your back away from your backrest, knees maybe a bit lower than your hips to ease some of the pressure you might have on the lumbar spine and the lower back. The crown of the head towards the ceiling, head just resting gently on the top of the spine. Arms just hanging by themselves, just kind of like heavy curtains just hanging there on their own weight. Hands could be folded in the lap, could be on the knees, can be anywhere that's comfortable for you. And so I'd like to invite you to come into stillness. And you can close your eyes if that feels right for you. If you'd rather leave your eyes open, you can do that too. But I just encourage you to have a soft gaze, maybe 45 degrees downwards. So not really looking at anything. Just let your gaze relax if you're going to keep your eyes open. And so starting to feel into the state of the body. The face. Is there any tension in the face? In the eyebrows, around the eyes? Noticing the cheeks, the jaw. We're familiarizing ourselves with our bodies and what our bodies do in times of resistance can help us bring this practice off the cushion. We can feel resistance in meditation, maybe in a smaller way. Becomes more noticeable when resistance is happening in our regular life. So noticing feelings in the chest, in the belly, in the shoulders and the upper back, in the lower back, noticing the sensation of sitting here, or whatever contact you have with the earth. So for me, sitting on this cushion, I can feel where the cushion touches my left buttock, my right buttock, so take that awareness dial and turn it all the way up. See if you can increase the resolution of your understanding of your experience. And so here I am. This body here now. Alive, awake, breathing. Can you feel your breathing? Where do you feel your breathing? My go-to location is the belly. Just feeling this large region of the body rising and falling as I breathe. See if you can hold your attention at that physical sensation. So nothing special, nowhere to go, nothing to accomplish. Just sitting here, observing the body in the present moment. And sometimes the mind gets distracted and wanders off, and we lose our awareness of our breath. At that moment, you have not failed. This is a key part of the meditation process. Notice that the mind has been carried away. Gently, as best you can, let go of that thing that carried you away and return your attention back to concentrating on the body, on the breath. If discomfort, boredom, restlessness, impatience, aversion, if any of these arise, try not to immediately change anything. Just pause. Take a moment to examine them. Feel the bodily expression. Notice thoughts without having to believe them or without having to challenge them. Notice any impulses you might have. Impulses to move, to stop, to escape. Potentially asking yourself, what is this like right now? Without trying to determine what's the right explanation. I mean, this isn't the time to analyze ourselves. And remember that this doesn't mean that we blindly push through. It doesn't mean that we injure our back because our back's in so much pain, but I gotta sit through it. I can't move. It's about observing the resistance, wisely choosing the next step. Not immediately acting or moving instantly because that's what our impulse tells us to do. It's about observing, exploring, understanding what that impulse is and what's behind it. So this practice of observing resistance is really tuning in to what is needed. Perhaps we stay. Perhaps we soften. Perhaps we move, adjust. And then returning to the body, returning to observing that feeling of breathing, concentrating on what it feels like in this present moment to be here, to be alive. And so as we go into the last few minutes of this meditation, just invite you to let go of investigation. No need to keep searching. Just let your experience be as it is. The breath, the body, sounds in the room, the thoughts that are here, the emotions that are here. Nothing to overcome. Simply knowing what is here. And as we start to draw this practice to its close, just like you to not turn off your mindfulness muscle yet. Notice what anticipation feels like. And maybe the subtle resistance that comes as we wait for the ending. And so I encourage you, don't move until the third ring of the bell has disappeared completely from your awareness. So I'm going to ring the bell 3 times, and then after the sound of the bell subsides, feel free to start moving around, open your eyes if they were closed, transition out of your period of formal practice. Well done. Thanks for sharing this time with me and with everybody else who's here. How are you feeling now? Did resistance appear clearly while you were meditating today, or maybe there wasn't any resistance at all? So we don't need any particular experience for our practice to be working. So just to kind of wrap up, remember, resistance isn't one thing. I don't want to takes a few different forms. It might be avoidance, something difficult that nevertheless matters. Maybe it's staleness, something valuable that needs refreshing in some way. Maybe it's protection. Something in us is asking for care or caution. And sometimes we just don't know yet. And that's important too. We don't always need to immediately interpret how we're feeling. What mindfulness does, it gives us a small pause. Instead of resistance equals an automatic reaction, we can have resistance going to awareness, going to a wise choice. And that might be what we need to continue. It might change something. It might even be telling us to stop. The goal isn't always overcoming resistance. The goal is to understand our experience well enough to respond rather than react. So today, the invitation is notice those ordinary moments in life when you say, I don't want to. And before forcing yourself through it or walking away, feel it, listen to it. Ask, what is this resistance telling me? And maybe, what's the wisest response right now? You don't need an immediate answer. Sometimes the practice is simply becoming curious enough to ask the question. It's time to close practice the way we do, with some well wishes to ourselves, well wishes to each other, and well wishes to everyone around the world. So follow along with me if you like. May I be happy and peaceful. May everyone watching, listening, wherever you are, I wish you all happiness and peace. May all sentient life throughout this universe, wherever we all may be, may we all be happy and peaceful. Thanks again for joining. Bye-bye.